Andrew Krystal with you. This is Krystal Nation. You can tweet me at Andrew Krystal with a K on Twitter. And you can also check out the FinTech Impact Podcast. My next guest is the host of that, Jason Pereira. He joins us right here on Sirius XM. Our new CIBC report shows that 48% of condo buyers in places like Toronto, Montreal are buying them for investment purposes. I think that is an accident waiting to happen, Jason Pereira.
Absolutely, because they're crowding out anyone who's actually trying to buy someplace affordable to live in. And is it logical? Well, I mean, if these people seem to all believe that, the increases are going to continue to be double-digit in perpetuity, then it makes sense because it's a great investment. But that's not how the world works.
Can I blame foreigners?
No, you cannot. And I've been saying this for years. It's like blaming ghosts. And that same study said that there's no evidence that more than 10% of any purchases in Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal have been foreign-owned. So, yeah, there's some of that, and I've seen some of that firsthand, but in general not. Like there is a large chunk of immigration that's buying that up, but the majority, the more than 50%, is us, is Canadians who are already here, who are looking to buy, and as we can see, 50% of those are buying for investment purposes.
The new mortgage rules are, in my opinion, a cluster F, and the reason for that cluster bomb is because it's driven up rental rates, which are going up like 13% as a result of making it higher in the mortgage game, you say?
I think it's different. So what's happened is that it's now a lot harder to get these big $1 million mortgages. So basically the average person, I mean, to basically right now to buy a condo in Toronto, you need a household income in excess of $100,000. Average condo about $580. In order to qualify for a mortgage with a minimum down, you're going to need about $100,000 household income. So because of that, last year, you could have probably got close to $1 million home. So because of that, what's happened is that more people are now pushed into the condo market because they can't get the fully detached home market. And that is going to push up demand for rental property as well, and therefore push up on rental rates. However, we have rent caps in this country, or at least in this province, and that can only increase a little bit every time. So unless there's turnover.
This is a national show, so there is no this province.
Well, most provinces have rent caps. So the reality is that unless these people leave their condos, that landlord is not going to see a bump up in rent that's significant.
All right. In this country, real estate is down, in some places 14% year over year. By the end of the month, if nothing changes, according to Jason Pereira of the FinTech Impact Podcast,
blame me.
Nothing changes, it'll be between 50 and 20%.
Yep.
So real estate, but it was overheated, so it's still above normal.
It was still above normal.
It was crazy.
We still have.
It's coming down a bit. But that's normal. It's like a temperature.
Well,
you still have a fever, only it's not 105.
Except that we're not in a recession. This is the issue. The economy's still doing fine, yet we're seeing a massive correction. What happens when people start losing jobs and stop having the ability to pay these mortgages?
They start gambling.
Well, that might be their only hope.
Just throwing
that might be their only hope. Lottery tickets. Yeah,
bet on the Leafs. That's what happens.
Let's not go there.
Yeah. When you lose your job, you have to bet on, or the horses. That's my advice.
Who's got better odds? Anyway.
That's my advice. Yeah. Okay, while I'm talking about gambling, I have to talk to you about this fantastical Dickensian ghost known as Bitcoin. The bloom is off the bleeding rose there, correct?
Oh, yeah. It's been off the rose for a while. The reality is that Bitcoin is down over 60% since the peak. I mean, it peaked at just under 20,000 American, and now at one point it touched close to 5,000. So you're looking at like a 75% drop. It's recovered a little bit somewhat. The reality is that blockchain, the underlying technology behind it, it's here to stay. Like that is going to revolutionize everything. But the concept of this being an alternative currency is hard for a lot of people to swallow, and most governments are not accepting it. And on top of that, there's lots of speculation of massive manipulation of that currency. I mean, if you just look at the price charts, you'll see days where it just jumps $500 within a couple minutes and stays there, and it makes no sense.
Okay, what do you say to people that, with regard to their investments? I mean, the volatility is unbelievable, and I do want to return to real estate.
Are we talking about like Bitcoin investments? Because that's not investments, that's gambling. That's crypto. The crypto game is a pure outright gamble. We have no idea which one of these thousands of altcoins now is going to survive and be functional going forward. None. In fact, there's something called an ICO, initial coin offering. So these companies started last year going out to market to basically try to raise money to come up with these Bitcoin or blockchain related enterprises. Over 50% of them are underwater in less than a year. So those people have lost.
But if you're in early, you can make good coin.
Well, if you're...
That's like a pyramid scheme.
Hey, if you pick the right number at the roulette table, you make a lot of money too. But that is the closest analogy I can give you because it is a pure crapshoot, or in that case, roulette wheel. Yeah.
I usually play craps.
I play games where I have odds of winning.
And I know you have young children, so you play a lot of craps too. Let's go back to real estate.
Yep.
Let's go back to real estate.
Talk about how bad it is?
Well, what should people do now? What's your advice, Jason Perot?
My advice was the same advice I had last year. Don't put yourself in a bad situation in the first place. There's plenty of people right now who are underwater.
Let's talk about those. I love watching the train wreck.
There's been a bunch of cases in the news, and it's only going to increase from here. So there was a case in Stouffville recently where it comes to
Stouffville, Ontario.
Yeah, Stouffville, Ontario. Family backed out of closing on a $2.25 million home because they couldn't get financing and the price of their home had dropped. They were looking to get like $1 million mortgage to get that dream house. And anyway, so the house ended up selling for $450,000 less than it went for, so they originally bought it for. So the owner turned around, sued him, and got $470,000 in damages out of him. And now that family had. If you walk away from a deal that you basically fail to close on, you forfeit your deposit, and you also are liable for losses in the marketplace, and that's what happened.
So their house that they needed to move before they bought the new one.
Yep.
So what was their loss on their house? They expected it to get X, and it got.
Well, not only that, they just couldn't get the loan. They couldn't get the loan. So they said their financial situation had changed. So that plus mortgage rules plus the drop in house of their value of the house, but they couldn't come near it.
Is it the drop in the value of their home that was the main thing that killed them?
There wasn't that many details in the article, but in this case, it's a very good cautionary tale. And I'm hearing this more and more now about people who are not going to close. There's a case out in Oakville, Ontario right now where there's a development where something like almost 100 people are trying to get out of the deal because the market, they're now trying to close on houses or townhouses that are worth less than they signed to basically close on. So let's just imagine you go and you say, I'm going to buy this place for $800,000. Now it's at $600,000.
But how could they do that? How could they buy? Because at that point, it was the valuation was $800.
Yeah. They bought at the peak of the market. So basically now, when the market drops, it doesn't matter. You have a contract to buy at $800. I don't care if it's $1. You have a contract. And they're trying to get sue the lender to let them out of it. It's never going to go anywhere. Never. They are on the hook. And if they fail to close that deal, they're going to lose and forfeit their deposits. And the lenders.
So they thought that the $800,000 home was going to go up to $1 million.
That's what they all think. I mean, I had a debate with, I'm not going to tell you who because it's in major media, who basically when I was doing one of these cases, these projections for a financial plan, they were arguing I should be using a 15% annual rate of return for housing. And I was just like, well, if that happens, Toronto's going to be occupied by nothing but Russian oligarchs. It's not possible. People think that what we've experienced recently is normal. That's not normal. What's normal is real estate moving in waves and typically close to inflation, not double-digit returns.
How far will the bottom drop out of the real estate market?
You know what? If we're looking at historical trend lines and where we should be, another 30%. However, I think
that would be normal for Vancouver and for Toronto.
Yeah, and Montreal to some extent, to a lesser extent. And you know what? You're seeing that. Like other areas in the GTA and the Greater Toronto area, like Markham and Aurora, they have 5 months worth of inventory right now. They're down 27 to 30% already. Right? We are not in a recession. This is the truly troubling thing. When people can't afford to pay these things because they've lost their job, what happens then?
Well, I had someone tell me in the industry, in the mortgage broker industry, with one of the big associations, that the real people that want to buy homes, the real families, that's fine. That part of the real estate sector is fine. It's the players, the flippers, the investors.
So let me tell you a story about that. Okay, so besides the fact that 48% of condos purchased last year were for investment purposes, listen how crazy these people are getting. 34% of that amount, they are cash flow negative, more than $1,000 a month. They are actually paying to have this investment. I would love, because I'm a financial advisor, I can't imagine saying to someone, hey, give me your money and then give me an additional $1,500 a month just to have the investment and hopefully it makes money. Right? That's what's going on right now. In fact, there was a case, I was talking to a friend of mine, he was trying to talk a client out of buying a condo for investment purposes. It was a negative 3% per year yield on the cash. Like literally he had to go out of pocket 3%. Right. So basically this guy thought, you know what, doesn't matter because the upside is so big, I'm going to take it anyway. And I did the math for him. I said, well, 3% plus inflation, let's call it 2, now you're at 5, factor in taxes, you need to make 8% a year just to break even on this thing. right? And this is the thing, is that everybody thinks that this mythological freaking 15 to 20% rate of return per year is going to continue on. Just do the basic math. 15% a year, it will double the value of property in this country inside of 7 years roughly, okay? That means, think about it, $1 million home becomes a $2 million home. 7 years later, it becomes a $4 million home. Who can afford this? Our salaries are not increasing anywhere near that level.
Means people need to buy more Bitcoin.
Well, it's a little bit late now. I know you're being sarcastic.
If you're just
I did not endorse that statement.
I'm going to take a sarcasm shower shortly. All right, we got about a minute left. It's tax time, Jason Pereira.
It is.
What say you, brother?
April 30th. And I'm also going to warn you guys about a tax that causes people a lot of problems. It's called T5008. Basically, it says you sold this and created a capital gain. The problem is CRA does not force us to report what the cost base was. So if you put that in, just that number, you're going to pay tax on the entire sale. You do not have to. Make sure you contact your advisor, find out what the cost base was, and pay only on the gain, not on the entire amount. And I'm telling you, there's tons of people paying extra tax they don't need to because they don't understand that form.
So if they sell a house...
Well, no, this is investment. So stocks, bonds, mutual funds, ETFs, stuff like that. They get that slip sent to them by the broker, and essentially it says, hey, you sold this much, but it doesn't say what the cost was. You only have to pay tax on the difference between the cost and what you sold. That's what you got to watch out for.
A lot of people don't know that.
A lot of people don't know that. I'm convinced it's a cash
And you're
grab.
also convinced that most people pay too much tax.
Yeah, just basically simply the way they organize their financial matters. Oftentimes I find that, when we take people on at my day job at Woodgate, we essentially just are able to shuffle things around in an appropriate way and reduce their tax bill with very little effort.
What will you be talking about on the next FinTech Impact podcast?
Well, next week I've got a big one. I've got a gentleman named Paula Cerrone, who is a thought leader at IBM and works at the IBM Watson FinTech division. So that is their artificial intelligence division. So I'm very much looking forward to that one. And hopefully my conversation with the phone, I think he's going to blow a lot of people's minds.
Well, artificial intelligence is big.
Yeah, and it's going to put a lot of what I do on a daily basis completely, it's going to automate a lot of it. And it's going to leave a lot of advisors who just do only that in the cold. My job is going to emerge into a very different position in the next couple of years.
It's very interesting. I always thought that some folks in the Trump administration had artificial intelligence, i.e. phony. You're always giving the straight goods, though. Jason Pereira, the FinTech Impact Podcast.
Yes.
Check it out.
Yeah.
And check him out on Twitter, and you can check me out, too, at Andrew Krystal with a K. I put the segments up online, so you can hear this back online if you want. When I come back, is there a book in you? Would you like to write a book? I'm going to show you how next.